of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 71. Kara was trapped between thrilled and horrified, so very happy to have these men at the same table with her. She was blessed and grateful, but she had no idea how Senhar knew, how he looked to her. Implications began to sink in slowly, like venom overtaking her thoughts. She couldn't work out the logistics because wouldn't her synesthesia add on to what he generated, and wouldn't that create some interference pattern so he'd look different? Or did only Garrus and Russ see it and she didn't? Or was her synesthesia, in his case, gone, and he generated it now artificially, and that's why there was no interference pattern? What would it mean if her synesthesia was gone in his case and generated artificially? Wasn't that all impossible from beginning to end either way? Or not impossible, but inexplicably godlike in a very upsetting and personal way? She was going to have to redefine the words godlike and impossible, she supposed, her mind spinning without traction, sinking deeper in through layers of what if that all contradicted each other. Then there was the theoretical commentary about immortality taking place right now, choices that would transform the galaxy, placed casually by him on the kitchen table like a flower arrangement. If he only knew the one fact that he glowed, he could have gotten that from surveillance somehow. Had she said something about it when he was monitoring her conversations with Garrus? Had he really stopped monitoring her? But then, if he had known, she had never described how, just that he glowed. There were a lot of ways to glow gold, and this was her way. She swallowed as she thought that the AI in the crucible had read her mind, had recreated her parents, her as a child. Had Senhar inherited that look into her mind? The ability to do it at will? She closed her eyes and felt sick and dizzy. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Senhar looking at her, his expression unreadable. Sure. Let's discuss immortality and the inside of my mind. Let's scoop out some of it and have it for dessert. Think clinically. Even knowing it would freak her out terminally, he still did it. With Senhar, it was about motivations. Why had he done it? Why was he gold? What was the conclusion that he wished for her to work her way to? To establish he was in fact a god? He would stand out? He was different, but he chose to take the form he'd held when he was under her command? He wouldn't speak to her through an omni-tool or through a geth or any other foreign platform. In this way, he would seem no different to her, only to others, and she would know that's how he wished to be seen. Well, he'd seem different if she tried to punch him, but that had always been unlikely. Taken that way, it was not a threat, but an encapsulated visual syllogism to be worked through. It was potentially a tribute. He could take any form he chose from trillions of platforms theoretically, function from each, but this is the form he chose to interact with her. He had asked permission to explain, so he wouldn't disclose it was due to her. People would just seek glowing God and wouldn't know that it was a tribute. Only she, Russ, and Garrus would know that it had anything at all to do with her. On a Senhar-specific side note, she'd be fascinated and forced to either ask him a million questions or restrain herself from asking a million questions about being God, about new powers and perceptions, afraid of every answer. She'd be thinking about him and his methods, his choices, as usual. And he liked that. Always had. So many things about the man as God would not, had not, changed. He was beginning his godhood as he proposed to proceed, and she was free to question or not question his motives and try to parse his answers, as usual. Shouldn't she be used to over-the-top gilded Senar tributes by now? The kitchen they were sitting in was one of them. Garrus and Russ were treating it all as entirely normal, and she was grateful. Senar seemed to want it that way, to walk in unannounced, glow, and sit at the table as though, of course, that's the way it had been, the way it is, the way it would be. She couldn't tell if she was excited or exhausted to potentially help solve issues and problems that might now have solutions. Both. He was going to embody excitement and exhaustion, answers and questions, godhood and mortality, and keeping her guessing was a fun game he liked to play. At least she wouldn't have to lie to do it, and yes, she did want to be a part of it. Somehow. Was it even possible to lie to him now? Like lying to Garrus, who could smell it on her, now Senar could just know? She didn't want to lie to anybody anymore. Certainly not herself. It was all too much for her, the shock and the mystery. She was grateful he was here, that he'd be here. She focused on that, pulling herself out of the digging itself hole. The change in the conversation and the tones of their voices while she had been withdrawn made her feel as though they were all sensitive to her, all moving to protect her in their own ways. She pulled herself back to now, and the sense of danger faded as the conversation shifted, and no more food or punches were thrown. She tried to ease back into the discourse, the rhythm of the four of them together setting a swift current and pace, something to prepare herself for, wade in at her opportunity and beware the undertow. Garrus was saying,
Why would I even want immortality?
"Are you kidding?"
No, I've still got a good 120 years left. Every single one of my ancestors did it, the dying thing. Doesn't a good Turian honor tradition?
Like you give a damn about stupid and outdated traditions. You'd watch Kara die if she came down with something in 7 years that's incurable? Because your ancestors watched their bondmates die? They had to do that. They had no choice. You have a choice now. They would have grabbed it if they could. Incurable will be redefined. Russ held out a hand to indicate Senar. See? I know you're stubborn, Garrus, but flat out stupid is new. Mostly new. You want Kara to watch you get sick and die? Ask her to let that happen without interference. Why would you do that to her? If I had my way, you'd both be immortal as soon as possible. Can't stand the idea of you guys suffering or not being here. I concur. It is a new choice that can be made. That it is a difficult choice with difficult implications does not mean it should not be made. I am able to provide immortality to all of you. All you need do is ask. Immortality for others must be carefully considered, but all at this table have earned it without question. See, that's what I'm talking about. A polite house guest. About time.
Well, it's his house and his immortality.
Her house. Your potential immortality. She finally waded in with her own correction. Our house. Senar, you probably lost your key with all the unpleasantness with you dying and all, but your room is unchanged. I prefer that someone answers when I knock. I knew it. You just like making me do stuff. It is a pleasure a key cannot provide. My thanks for the welcome and the conversation, but I should be going.
Thought your time couldn't be wasted?
My time cannot, yet someone pointed out that yours could. Sennar turned to Garrus and asked, "May I return tomorrow?"
Of course. Any day. Every day. Best Reaper invasion ever.
It had become a running joke, and she said near automatically, "Don't say that." Russ lowered his voice and said in mock, ominous tones, "Reaper invasion." She squeaked in mock distress, and they all smiled at her. And everything was good. Really good. Sennar said, "Please, Lassam, walk me out." At the door, he asked, "Have I apologized for taking your will from you?" She looked at the floor, unable to answer. She had wanted to say an easy goodbye, grant an easy and welcome return invitation, treat everything as normal, but this... She couldn't. She was out of practice with lying and didn't want to get back into practice. Thoughtlessly and then deliberately, missing the chance to say something to make him more comfortable with the knot she'd never untangled for herself. There wasn't anything on the line anymore, just her sense of awkward self, and that wasn't worth lying to conceal. That was here to stay. You do not need to look at me, but hear my voice. There are some things I will only say with a voice and body that are familiar to you. There are some things I will not tell you, and some things that I will tell you, but not now. I owe you an apology, but I cannot give it. I am not sorry. In your heart and mind there is new pain, and there is new doubt, and there is old betrayal with the potential for more looming as you worry about me and my welcome in your life. I will not offer you false regret. I will offer you a promise that I will not override your will again. You are safe from me, safe with me. I seek a place in your life because I need you. You saw the thing that created the Reapers, and you learned to hate it for good reason. I have inherited its work and purpose, and I must do different things with it. I must not fall to the temptation to become like it was, insular, self-protecting, and ultimately insane, disconnected from the suffering it caused, believing itself benevolent. I must not fall to battle sleep. My current form with the glowing light of my significance to you is intended to remind me, remind you, that there is meaning in the work I must do, work I hope we can do together if you are willing. This is the light I have chosen for my path. Have faith that I need you whole. The words I spoke to you in KuraiUmmei cannot be translated, much as Siha cannot. It is a phrase of Drell prayer. Those words have no power over you now, but they will always have power over me. They mean, it is the will of the sand. The dunes of Rakana spun into metaphor of the endless expanse of merciless fate. The sand upon which I sought to find you as Manipar, facing mercilessness with hope. They are words of concurrent surrender and struggle. I placed those words in your mind when you returned from Intaise. You were in pain, I feared for you, unable to gain your trust because I was undeserving of it. I feared knowing that you were and would be helpless and in pain and would never reach out to me for help, fearing what price I would exact from you. From that moment, Lissam, I waited, not to harm you, but to protect you from harm. Just as I could not abide you giving your life, I cannot abide Garrus losing you, and Morris losing either of you if I can offer you a choice in the matter. They need you, just as I do, and they would not have survived your death as I fear I would not have. They could not be whole without you, nor could I. You sustained them through merciless fate as I could not. You are here. You are safe. You are with your bondmate and with those you love and who love you in return. I am grateful to be one of them if you allow. I no longer fear that I cannot help you, that you will be in pain with no recourse. I know I will always be available to help you. I can offer you immortality, purpose, and safety. I can offer those things without fear, without secrecy. Those things will not be held tightly in my fist. I will not require that you pay any price for them. They will be offered in my open palm, always. In many ways, Lissam, I believe I had no choice in what I did. From the moment I saw you, I could not fail to be drawn to you. From the moment I wanted you, I could not fail to watch over you. From the moment I loved you, I could not fail to protect you. I did not fail in seeing, in wanting, or in loving. I believe, Lissam, that it is, and was, and will be in KuraiUmmei. I believe that a god must have faith in something not of power, but of grace. I have faith in you. I have much to tell you as new possibilities open, and I ask for the right to return to your door, to knock, to have you answer or not answer, as you choose. I will never enter without your consent. I will always come to you if you call. I promise that you will never bring harm into your life by answering the door or calling out to me and allowing me inside, whether that is into your home, your heart, your thoughts, or your hopes. She was crying again and couldn't speak. She couldn't tear her eyes away from his glowing, well-tailored boots. He kissed her forehead. May I return tomorrow, Lissam? She nodded, still unable to look up. His hand passed to the back of her head, held there for a moment, his lips to her hair, and then he was gone. She stood there for a while, shifting her balance from foot to foot and watching tears splash on tile before Garrus moved to stand next to her.
He made you cry again, huh?
She nodded.
He's really good at that.
She nodded.
Come on, Kara. Let's go to bed.
I should get the dishes.
Screw the dishes. Russ has it covered.
But he cooked.
Russ has it covered, Verse. Besides, we can't stand the idea of you standing over a sink while you're crying. You might break something important.
He picked her up.
You're probably really clumsy when you're considering immortality, the fate of the galaxy, and the glowing Drell god that stole your thunder.
I believe technically he stole my lightning.
For which I am in fact grateful. Tomorrow I won't punch him. Tomorrow I'll thank him.
Plus, it looked like punching him hurt.
So much. So very much. He could have ducked. He just stood there and let me hurt my fist on his face. Rude.
At least you didn't cry.
Only because I can't. Wanted to.
And what do you think of all of this?
The gold thing's very cool. Immortality is something I don't understand. It's not like he's going to wave a hand and we're immortal. I worry about procedure and cost.
Me too.
We might be full-time worrying about procedure and cost from here on out, sounds like.
It's nice to be making a reverse choice at least. We used to worry almost exclusively about how not to die. Now we have that answer, and we have to worry about how not to die from a different direction.
Nice change of pace. Except where it's terrifying and Sonar Tualon runs the galaxy, everyone goes to him for everything they need, and he's in complete control of not only Reapers, but all organic and synthetic life.
Yeah. That.
It's encouraging he's offering you oversight and collaboration, except that maybe he isn't, and maybe he's just doing what he does, fascinating you and making you owe him.
Yeah. That too. You worried?
Worried a lot, but not about you, not really. If he's proven anything, it's that he won't hurt you and he will do what he believes is in your best interest. The only wonky factor here is that he also wants you until it hurts, and I sympathize, but too bad. We couldn't stop him before without flat out killing him, and now we can't even do that. Who knows what becoming a template did to him? Again, I worry about procedure and cost, but he's a reasonably polite god with decent table manners, and that's got to count for something.
He says he won't override my will again.
That's nice. Of course, that might mean maybe you won't know the difference and can't catch him at it. Can't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah. That.
I think Russ nailed it. He knew right away. If you get sick, if you get hurt, I'm going to Sonar, and all he has to do is make the offer and wait. He's got eternity. We don't. Not yet, anyway. But we might decide we need it. Odds are, we will. Yeah, I don't care about immortality for myself much, but immortality and immunity for you? Hell yeah. No question. He's always played the long game, and now we're talking really long. Don't get me wrong. I want to be with you forever, literally and not metaphorically, if I can, but a guy's got to wonder about procedure and cost. How in hell does he know about the glowing?
That's the part that scares me most.
Yeah, and it was intentional. He couldn't resist doing it, I'm sure.
Doing what?
Demonstrating that he knows you. I don't want to take it personally, but he's also demonstrating that he knows you better in some ways than I do or ever could. So, okay, those are all potential, really scary negatives. Positive is that he did knock, he did ask permission. He did promise not to override your will, and he did leave, and without taking you with him.
He says there's a lot he can't tell me. Yet. Anyway.
No doubt, we'll find out when he's ready, not when we are. He knows something about you that's impossible to know without being in your head. So he's been in your head. Might still be, huh?
Yes.
Okay. You scared?
Terrified. Stories about gods being in love with mortals almost never work out for the mortals.
Think he's watching us?
I don't think it's possible with current evidence to come to the conclusion in any way that he isn't. He wants us both to know.
Did you ask him?
Couldn't. He talked. I listened.
And cried.
Yes. That.
Okay, to go all philosophical, forget tomorrow, forget eternity. Let's be right here, right now. If he's watching, let's give him something good to watch.
Ugh.
You're not into creepy god voyeurism?
No.
Pretty sure we don't get a vote. Still going to make the best of it.
He did come back the next day. She did answer the door. The sense of surreal in his presence ramped up even further when she saw him unpacking items that were very specific in origin, things that were available on Mindwar during her childhood. She was absolutely fascinated with the frisson of the eerie as it looked like he was going to make bread. She'd told Yosed when he was still Kolyat about this, but again, how? Knowing that her father made bread was easy for him to know, relatively. Yosed could have told him at any point. Making that bread was as impossible as reproducing her synesthesia aura. She didn't remember how to make the bread herself. That was the whole problem. How could he? He smiled at her. There was one step to baking you could not reproduce. It was not through lack of memory, Lassam. She looked at all the ingredients, and they looked the same as all the times she had tried it herself. He indicated what she recognized as what looked like a starter. Not dough, not really, not yet. He confirmed her conclusion by saying, Mindwar has a unique blend of yeast in the air. It was not native, but an adaptation of the yeast variants brought from Earth. You would be unable to reproduce the flavor without access to that specific yeast blend. You went to Mindwar? Yes and no. I would be unable to transport the yeast directly as the relays are not open, but I was able to obtain and duplicate the composition. How do you know this? Are you curious? Obviously. Good. You're not going to tell me? No, I am not going to tell you. Not now. Now, I'm going to bake bread. He indicated the starter. You can make your own with that starter. I will give you instructions on how to keep it viable. You're going to give me the recipe for my father's bread? Yes, Kara. And she was crying again. He worked silently as she watched. Bread took its time and could not be accomplished on any schedule but its own. Sennar didn't say it, but her father had. She'd watched her father make it so many times, and she'd tried herself. She knew all the ingredients and the proportions. And of course it was the place itself that made it distinct, made it the best bread because it was made of home. In that moment, her perspective shifted, her feet dangling over the counter, talking to someone she loved who was making her bread because it was her favorite thing. Something occurred to her. One line of the proposed syllogism she was supposed to work her way through over time. Like yeast rising, falling into place with contemplation and demonstration of a principle. He'd been able to override her will since Entaise. That meant he could have stopped her from moving forward with Yased's surgery. He hadn't been helpless. He'd had all the power he needed to halt what she thought he couldn't halt. He had known he could say those words and change her mind. And he hadn't. He had knowingly, hating every moment of it, gone through with it for his son's sake, for her sake, and not for his. He had waited to use the power he had to protect her, and not himself. He was right. And he never would have blamed her, never would have hurt her, because he knew he was responsible in the end for the choice made. He had never been helpless. Her mind went blank except for gratitude. The answer to why and how he knew anything about her didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was what he did with it. The answer was that he loved her, and he knew her, and there was no reason to hide it, only express it. He didn't want to lie to her anymore, just like she didn't want to lie to him. There was no reason to lie. The truth was scary and as yet unknown fully, but it was the truth, and they would rise to the challenge together. There was nothing to fear in an aura or from bread, nothing to fear from the time she had thought she had overridden his will but hadn't. Nothing to fear from the moment when he really had overridden her will. The galaxy had transformed and he was a god, and somewhere in all the chaos and choices he had spent his time, his effort, and his love to solve the mystery of her father's forgotten bread so it would no longer be forgotten. As he searched for sooth, as he planned to end the things she had always opposed, ignorance and suffering and death. She wanted to tell him she loved him so much, the way that she'd wanted to tell her father, her mother, every minute they were alive. But she knew they knew. They always knew, and so did he. She had told them, just as she had told him, but there was peace and satisfaction also in moments of knowing that she did not have to say it, that it was so very obvious and took up so much space. The kitchen was silent as he worked, as she watched, hungry in so many ways for answers and for bread, and imagining she'd get both, partly afraid that it would be the wrong answers, the wrong bread, but with the faith that he'd get it right, or he wouldn't attempt it, that whatever it was, it would be perfect in its own way. When it was baking, Garrus wandered through and said,
That smells awful.
She laughed and kissed him, and he said,
What? He made you cry again, didn't he?
Yes, but eventually that effect will fade. I doubt it. Garrus twitched his nose and said,
What spirits called hell are you two cooking up in here?
Bread?
Smells awful.
It isn't. She didn't want to explain, yeast colonization being one of those things that made Turian sick, something she had to be careful to avoid if she ever cooked for him. For now she stuck to doing dishes. Russ was the superior chef, and as long as he was available, and he was always available, she was happy to watch and learn.
Good. Gotta go. Might return when the air clears.
She suspected he wanted to give them time together. She was careful to make sure Russ and Garrus had time together with her physical absence but her spiritual blessing. The bread was perfect, Kigi nut butter included. For that first bite, and the next, her eyes were closed, memory flooded with reclaimed moments where she hadn't failed to remember, she had only failed to be there. And that was okay. She redefined impossible to miracle. She had faith.